Hello viewers, I am Dr. Sandhya Tiwari. Today we will have a session on the poem Indian Weavers, which is written by Sarojini Naidu. I am sure Sarojini Naidu does not need much of introduction because she was popularly known as the Nightingale of India. But before we discuss the poem Indian Weavers, which is penned by her, let us have a look at the life of the poet, her biography, themes that she dealt, her poetry, and the imagery that she has used, apart from the critical appreciation of the poem and its symbolic importance. When we come to the life of Sarojini Naidu, she was the eldest daughter of scientist philosopher Agornath Chattopadhyay, and her mother was Varada Sundari. She was born on 13th of Feb 1879 in Hyderabad. She carried forward the task left incomplete by her the demise of Torudutt. She was also a poet, that of interpreting the soul of India to Indians in the very original way. Like I said, it was a kind of diverse influence which shaped the personality of Sarojini Naidu. Let's have a look at it. She was the daughter of a scientist, a linguist, and who had a strong dash of philosophy. He was a philosopher, and mother was a poet. She also was a polyglot, that means knowing many languages as such. Now, being Bengali by birth, staying as a Hindu in Hyderabad, having the influence of Deccan, the Deccani culture as such, she was quite comfortable even in the Muslim environment, which also had some influence on the personality of Sarojini Naidu. Later on, she married a non-Brahmin. So this also speaks about her nature, or rather tolerance towards other religions as a human being. And throughout it is said, Sarojini Naidu was a very, very compassionate person, having a lot of sympathy and then humanity as such in her. Apart from that, she was quite stoic and resilient. That is the reason many of the situations when she was suffering, she was sick, in spite of her ill health, she was able to overcome and stand to the occasion, rise to the occasions where she had to take part in freedom struggle and other things as such. Now, she was a great orator. This is exemplified looking at the way how she was able to influence many people whomever she has met. And in this connection, I would like to give a reference where Stevenson, he said that Sarojini's entrance in a room was like as if another candle is lit. That is what was told about the exuberance of Sarojini Naidu's personality. Quite dynamic a person, having a lot of flair, an observant eye, matured outlook, at the same time very childlike at heart, always on the lookout for some pleasantness, the brighter side of life but not the bleak side. No doubt, she has penned in her poems, or rather depicted in her poems, both the facets of life. We can look at the observant eye with which Sarojini was blessed by God, just with this example of a poem. She was very considerate a person by nature and sympathetic. This is exemplified when we read some critical sources on her works, where we are conveyed, if at all if somebody is not well, unwell, or if she is required to receive someone, irrespective of her health, she used to attend to that emergency or say responsibility. And she was, because of her nature, considered by many a people like older sister, to whom they thought they will be able to approach for any sort of personal problem or responsibility as such. See, why we are discussing about these things is all these personality traits would make the poet, because poetry is nothing but then the kind of feelings, emotions, or the traits which a person has got, that's what she is going to put forward in the form of works. And the simple poem of just 12 lines is speaking about the kind of perception, clarity that she had as a poet. There is one reference about which I am sure it's worth noting or interesting for all of you to know, where just 2 lines speak about a resilient attitude in life. That means how she was a person who never got perturbed in life in spite of all the problems. She used to be the same cheerful and agile, no doubt. She has a very, very mature side to her personality, but whenever she was away or outside of that, she used to just be the same simple person at heart with lot of cheerfulness. That is the reason it is said she was always on the lookout for life and light, but not death and darkness. Now, these two lines from one of her poems where she says, "Behold, I rise to meet the destined spring and scale the stars upon my broken wing." Look, the difference is to the broken wing, but still she is so enthusiastic, or rather so positive by attitude. She is challenging the circumstances and she says, "I have decided, I have destined to come to you." That means spring. Spring again symbolizes something which is bright, positive, something to look forward to. Okay, so she is, in spite of having the broken wing, destined to reach the spring. Not the bleaker side, but the brighter side is what she tried to depict in her poems, for which she was definitely criticized a lot. Like many of the themes in her poetry or in her poems were majorly categorized as love poems, poems depicting nature, poems about the folk culture, folklore, about the folk life of India and all. But whatever she has penned, it was something which was original. One more reference where she is trying to depict or present the river Musi which flows in Hyderabad. Like she says, like the river coming from both the sides of the gate of Hyderabad is something like the tusk of an elephant. Now look at the originality of the presentation. She also tries to be very, very observant in one more depiction here, which is an example. Like she says, the moon in the sky is like a caste mark on the forehead of a woman. That means, look at the originality of the thought here. She is comparing the moon in the sky to the caste mark on the forehead of a woman. No doubt, many people ignoring the brighter side or say observant eye of Sarojini Naidu criticized her for lack of intellectual fervor. But dear all, it is not always that a person aspires to become intellectual like a philosopher in a poem. Definitely there is lot of philosophy edge, but then she had more of humanitarian tinge to her persona, which is what comes to surface. The observations, like even the poem Bangle Sellers penned by her, where she talks about again the kind of aspirations with which people are filled. See, everything was quite original in all of her works. Diverse currents of tradition, many roads of influence have what shaped her personality. Now, one more reference, like many of us remember either the name, the association, the face, but she was blessed with a memory where she was able to remember all the three, and that is what influenced her people about her. So she was having a kind of mesmerizing persona as an individual, because of which she was also quite instrumental in the freedom struggle of India. She also served as the governor of UP for some time, right? And later on, at the age of 70, she died. In spite of having many a times ill health and all, she was hailed or rather appreciated by people of her caliber, and she was able to bring in a kind of name to Indian literature, Indian writing in English, especially the poems, which are no doubt just 3-4 volumes, but then she was very, very popular only because of the 4 volumes that she has penned, just quite simple. But yes, she was also a very person quite expressive, like in spite of her parents not very much willing for her marriage to Govindarajula Naidu, she was able to convince them, though she was sent. Remember, she was sent by the father at the age of 16 when she fell in love with Govindarajula Naidu, who was a doctor by profession, so that she gets, in a way, she comes out of that infatuation. The father was wondering it's nothing but just infatuation for the girl. But then, after coming back, because she was not able to forget even during her stay in England, right, she was not able to forget Govindarajula Naidu. But after coming back, she married him, convincing the parents. the poem Indian Weavers, which is written by Sarojini Naidu. Weavers weaving at break of day, why do weave a garment so gay? Blue as the wing of a halcyon while we weave the robes of a newborn child. Weavers weaving at fall of night, why do you weave a garment so bright? Like the plumes of a peacock, purple and green, we weave the marriage veils of a queen. Weavers weaving solemn and still, why do you weave in the moonlight chill? White as a feather and white as a cloud, we weave a dead man's funeral shroud. The present poem, which is titled Indian Weavers, is from the collection of poems The Golden Threshold. Now, I am sure those who have been to Hyderabad or those who reside in Hyderabad, they must be knowing there is a place called Golden Threshold. And now it's really very interesting, a kind of reference. This title, or rather the title collection of poems, is named after her home, which she constructed in Hyderabad. Now this poem Indian Weavers, the structure of the poem is quite appealing or very simple, yet very philosophical. Like the three stanzas which she has penned, they've got rhythm, they've got philosophy, they've got imagery, they've got a lot of symbolism etched in them. Now look at the structure. The first two lines of each stanza, there is a question posed. Here the questioner can be anybody. Perhaps it could be just the poet herself. She is posing a question in the first two lines, which the weavers are answering. So these three questions are put to the weavers at the three different hours: daybreak, fall of night, and the chill moonlight night. Now, there is a lot of reference to this also, which we will be learning when we discuss symbolism and imagery. Looking at the poem, where we have three stanzas, three questions are posed, as I already told you. First two lines in the first stanza, she is asking the weavers, so early in the morning, what are you weaving? The garment is so bright, it has the blue color. What are you doing? It's a question posed. Let's imagine here the poet herself. And the weaver's answer to that, we are weaving or making a cloth or a robe for a newborn child. The second stanza, the fall of night, again a question is put by the questioner here, the poet, what are you weaving? Or rather, why you are weaving a garment which is again so bright? In the beginning, it was gay. That means a lot of cheerfulness, some sort of celebration. Now the garment, the second question, why you are weaving a garment which is so bright? Then the answer came from the weavers, where they say, here we are weaving a marriage veil for the queen, which has got the color of peacock blue, purple and green. So these three colors make the garment look quite vibrant and bright. And the third stanza, she is questioning the weavers, in this night, chill night, the time is so still, everything appeals to be so solemn. What are you doing? What you are weaving now? Then the answer from the weavers was, we are weaving a dead man's funeral shroud. We are weaving a garment which is of pure white color. Here the color has again some reference, which we will be covering under the component of imagery. Now look at the pattern of the poem. Just 12 simple lines, but then lot of philosophy is etched in the poem by the poet Sarojini Naidu. That was her flair, or rather you can have a look at the rhythmic quality of the poems also, where words bring music. Just when you go through the words, when you go through the poem, it has got a kind of rhythmic appeal. The repetition of the sound, the use of the similes, the other figurative devices which she has employed, bring in the kind of effect which is quite appealing to the readers. Now, when we look at the poetry of Sarojini Naidu, she, all the poems penned by her are clubbed in 4 categories or 4 volumes, thin volumes as such, which are The Broken Wing, The Golden Threshold, and 2 more. Later on, 3 were clubbed together and brought out like one single volume. She had kind of zeal, where she wanted to be very, very authentic towards the end of her poetic career as such. But then let's have a look what shaped her or what made her to be that original, where she was trying to just write something which was quite original or which appealed to her visual or observant eye. Now, when she moved to England at the age of 16 for further studies, she happened to show a few of her poems to Edmund Gosse, who, rather than just admonishing her, also suggested, do not go for something which is alien to you. Try to present something which is yours, something which you have intimately or closely noticed, that is something Indian. Now, before we discuss further about this, let's look at the way how her career was shaped. When once she was sick, her physician advised her, do not touch the book, don't read the book, so as she is not strained. But because she was unhappy with that kind of a suggestion given to her, the same time, just to spite him, she started penning a poem, and that is what was later on named as The Lady of the Lake, which is a poem of 1300 lines. And remember, at that time, she was hardly 13 years old, right? And before that also, when she was just 11 years, when she was trying to solve a problem, a sum in algebra, rather than getting the solution for the problem, she was able to pen a beautiful poem. And from then onwards, she went on scribbling verses. And before she left for England, she had to her credit good number of verses which can themselves make a full volume. But afterwards, in coming contact with the people like Edmund Gosse and all, she was asked rather to pen something which is original, which she has perceived closely, which she has noted quite closely. Then started her journey where she was trying to be very original, depicting only what she has perceived. Now, what exactly is imagery? Let us try to understand. Image is nothing but a representation. Imagery is something where you would be able to visualize something in the sense as if you are perceiving it with the mind's eye. So here in this poem, the kind of vividness with which she has penned the poem brings to you the 3 different phases. Philosophically, it is not just the weaving activity which is talking about, but they are representing the 3 different phases of a human being's life: birth, marriage, and death. Now, when you want to fully understand a poem, you have to feel it with the same feeling with which the poet has penned it. And that is the way, to understand a poem, where you are able to imagine, visualize in the right perspective the sense appeal with which she has penned it. Like say here, the presentation of colors, the words which speak about the time, the tactile sense to which she is touching upon, and other things, the mood of the day, the time, the situation, all things would be presented to you, or rather they come to you when you try to visualize each word, which comes with a vigor. That is what was the poetic, flair of Sarojini Naidu, for which she was very, very popular. No doubt, she was criticized like she was not having something quite intellectual in her poems. That is the reason some of them went for saying, she may not make you think, but she will make you imagine. She will make you see something that she has written, that she has penned. The poet uses sounds, names of colors, and above all, the other rhetoric devices to bring in the overall effect or impact. In the present poem, she is using definitely symbolism but not allegory. Now, before I discuss symbolism, let's try to understand why it is not allegorical. Allegorical poem is something, or allegory is something where you try to speak about an experience in a metaphorical way, an experience which is symbolically representing something else, right, beyond the literal meaning. But here it is not the experience but only the thought that Sarojini Naidu is presenting, depicting to the readers. Now, the kind of symbols that Sarojini Naidu has, interwoven here by using the names of colors, sounds and other things, the time at which the question was posed, how it was answered, brings to us a lot about philosophy, or rather say Indian philosophy. When we think about the Indian philosophy, I am sure most of you must be knowing the Trinity, that is Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra. They are called as the Trinity, who are there performing the respective roles, like the creator, the Lord Brahma creator, and then Brahma, Vishnu, the one who takes care of prosperity, marriage, riches, other things as such, and then Rudra, the god of destruction. Now look, in the first stanza, she is talking about Brahma symbolically, how Brahma is the creator. When she is referring to break of day, life emerges, something is opening up. So she is trying to symbolically hit upon the beginning of creation, and that is what is symbolized by the colors that they are using to weave the robe of a newborn child, that is new life which is introduced, which is emerging. And look at the halcyon wild. The color is that of the halcyon wild, that means the sea blue. I am sure you all must be knowing Brahma is believed to be having his abode in the sea, who emerges from the sea seated in a lotus. Now, the color of sea is blue. Here also she is trying to refer or say symbolically use the name of the color blue as the wing of a halcyon wild, okay, with which they are weaving the child's robe. I am sure you got the point here, how symbolism is used in the first stanza, right? Brahma, the creator, weavers are here are representing the creation, and they are weaving a cloth which is quite vibrant for the newborn child. In the second stanza, fall of night, garment is very bright. The reference to Lord Vishnu, the god or the Lord who is there, taking care or performing his role as the god of prosperity, marriage, growth and all. And the colors are quite vibrant. Here the reference is to marriage, that means something to which they are looking forward to. The night which is bright, where all the beautiful hues are there, the marriage of a queen which is going to be celebrated. So here also there is got lot of symbolic reference where she is trying to symbolize the god of prosperity, Vishnu. And the third stanza, that is where she is talking about the destruction, something which is quite solemn, still, chillness in the moonlight night. Quite dark in the night when the weavers are weaving a cloth which is funeral shroud, it's pure white. Okay, so here look, the three things are symbolized by the poetess: the birth, the prosperity and the death. Now, when we look at the third stanza, the kind of reference that she is making to white, it also brings to our mind how India is a country having symbolic reference to colors. And it should not be a problem for the readers to interpret how she is exploiting the flair or the use of colors in Indian society or culture. For example, just try to imagine a bride from Kerala region. Could be to some extent, I am not very specific about my reference, but I am sure it is going to give you a lot of understanding. When you want to just imagine or think about a bride hailing from Kerala region, the thing which comes in your mind is off-white sari with rich golden border. Similarly, when you try to imagine about a bride who hails from Telugu community or Telugu region, definitely white with red border. So that is what the kind of symbolic reference colors have in our Indian society, and she is trying to exploit them to the fullest. This is the kind of a reference which she is using, a combination reference to colors to bring in imagery, symbolically talking about the different times, and also trying to hint upon the mythology, Indian mythology, Brahma, Vishnu and Rudra. So a few personality traits quite dominant in her: her observant eye, her nature as a human being. All these things have shaped the life of Sarojini Naidu, where she is still praised and applauded as a great personality of India, right, whose birthday is celebrated as Women's Day, and she is also called as the Nightingale of India. I am sure you all must be knowing she is called as the Nightingale of India because she was blessed with a very beautiful voice. Maybe that flair for singing she has acquired, got the trait from her mother, who was also a singer, and because she had flair or ear for music, she was able to bring in the same rhythmic quality in her works too. Now, after going through the poem, I am sure many of you would be quite interested to learn more about her, read something more. Then there is one more poem which is there, penned by her, The Gift of India. Like patriotism was also one of her dominant themes in the poems. So there is the poem The Gift of India, where she is using very beautifully the device of alliteration, the repetition of the same speech sound, which is also quite appealing. Now, this just simple poem of 12 lines is going to enthuse you, where you feel like reading more of Sarojini Naidu than simply limit yourself to what you have learnt over here. Yes, you have learnt here the beautiful use of imagery, the application or how she has employed symbolism, how Indian culture is quite rich, or rather where we are trying to still keep to the ground with the reality, where we believe in mythology, the creation, prosperity and destruction, which we in a way feel it's just there in the hands of Almighty. So these things would enthuse you to read further Sarojini Naidu. And there are many poems like Indian Weavers, The Bangle Sellers, The Palanquin Bearers, The Buddha Seated on the Lotus, Gift of India, mostly lyrics and songs. She never went for writing any poem in blank verse because she never had any interest to take up that kind of device also. Yes, the rhythmic quality of her poetry is what appealing to everybody, and the words flow with natural flair. Just when you read the poem itself, there is a kind of rhythm which comes naturally. The meter that she applies, the kind of device that she applies brings a richness, something which is quite vivid and unique of her poetry. And this is what is represented by the poem that is selected for your syllabi, that is Indian Weavers. So this poem is just a beginning for all of you. I am sure it's going to definitely make you quite interested to read beyond Indian Weavers, which is just a very short poem. Still, while discussing this poem, I try to refer to many good works or good poems of Sarojini Naidu. I wish everybody takes up seriously the works which are penned by Sarojini Naidu, because it's going to be quite relaxing, which you would enjoy if at all, if you have flair for poetry. So wishing you all the very best. See you all in the next session. Thank you.